Marcus arrived at the charity party with the same calm and gentle smile he always carried, even though this event was one of the biggest nights of the year. Expensive cars were parked outside the hotel, lights were glowing everywhere, and soft music was playing from the grand hall. People in shiny clothes and heavy jewelry walked inside with confidence, laughing loudly, shaking hands, and greeting each other as if they all belonged to the same exclusive world. Marcus walked in quietly, almost unnoticed, even though he was one of the main investors behind this huge event, but he never liked attention, so he simply blended into the crowd without trying to stand out. Inside the hall, the air smelled like flowers and expensive perfumes. Waiters moved around carrying trays with drinks and small snacks. A few people looked at Marcus when he entered, but most of them quickly looked away, assuming he was just another guest with no special role. Marcus did not mind. He actually hoped no one would recognize him at first. Big crowds always made him a little uncomfortable, so he preferred to stay low and observe everything calmly before taking his place at the reserved table near the front of the stage. A young waitress smiled at him and offered him a drink. Marcus thanked her politely. Unlike many guests who barely noticed the staff, he always treated everyone with respect. The waitress, surprised by his kindness, smiled a little wider and walked away. Marcus stood near a tall, decorated pillar and looked around the room. He noticed an older businessman bragging loudly to his group. He saw women showing off their designer bags. He heard small laughs and fake compliments being exchanged everywhere. It was a world full of shiny surfaces, but Marcus knew better than anyone that you could not judge a person's true value from the outside. Across the hall, another couple entered the room. Amanda and Greg. They looked perfect together, dressed in expensive clothes and wearing expressions that showed they believed they were important. Amanda held her head high, scanning the room as if she owned every corner of it. Greg fixed his tie every few seconds, trying to look impressive. They were the type of couple who loved attention, and people usually gave it to them. When they walked inside, several heads turned. Some admired their confidence. Others found them a little too proud, but no one said anything. Marcus noticed them too, though not with jealousy or irritation. He simply observed them the same way he observed everyone else. The couple walked toward the tables at the front, the same area where Marcus had a reserved seat. There was a small name card with his name on it placed neatly on the chair. But since he stood away from the table for a moment, the seat looked empty from far away. Marcus knew he would eventually go sit there, but for now, he preferred to stay aside and wait until the speeches began. The couple stopped not too far from Marcus. They whispered something to each other, and Amanda giggled in a sharp tone. Greg nodded briefly, pretending to listen. They acted like they were above everyone else. Some guests around them rolled their eyes quietly, but again, no one said a word. Fancy parties often came with fancy attitudes, and people were used to ignoring them. Marcus slowly walked toward the dessert table to take a small break from the noise. While he did, he noticed a few people watching him curiously. It was not open disrespect, but more like they were trying to figure out whether he belonged in such a high-class event. Marcus was used to it. All his life, he had seen people make quick judgments before knowing who he really was. It did not make him angry anymore. Instead, it made him more patient and more careful with how he treated others. As he tasted a small chocolate pastry, a man walked up to him and nodded politely. Marcus nodded back. The man did not know he was greeting the top investor of the night. Many people in the room did not know either. Marcus preferred it that way. Showing his power or money had never been his style. He always believed that a person's behavior mattered far more than their wealth. Still standing near the dessert table, Marcus could feel a strange quiet tension growing in the room. He did not know why yet, but something felt slightly off. People were watching each other a little longer than usual. A few guests were whispering behind their glasses. Even the waiters seemed to move more slowly, as if expecting something uncomfortable to happen. Marcus took a deep breath and scanned the area again. Nothing seemed wrong. Maybe it was just the normal pressure of a fancy event. The music changed to a softer tune. A group of women walked past Marcus, chatting loudly about who donated the most money last year. He smiled to himself, thinking how strange it was that people cared more about being seen donating than actually helping others. But he stayed quiet and continued looking around, enjoying small details like the decorations and the fresh flowers. At the same time, Amanda and Greg were trying to find the best table to sit at, something close to the stage so everyone would notice them. They moved from table to table, criticizing each one in a whisper. When they approached Marcus's reserved table, Amanda's eyes sparkled. The empty-looking seat looked perfect to her. She tapped Greg's arm and pointed in excitement. From across the room, Marcus did not notice what they were planning. Even though things seemed normal on the surface, a single decision was about to change the entire energy of the night. One small moment, one seat, and one quiet man would soon reveal who really belonged in that room and who had been pretending. But for now, the night moved on with a strange calmness, and Marcus continued to watch everything with the same gentle smile, not knowing how fast the situation was about to shift. Amanda and Greg kept walking around the hall, pretending they were choosing a seat carefully, but anyone watching closely could see they were looking for the spot that would give them the most attention. Amanda's eyes scanned the tables like a queen choosing her throne. She noticed the front tables first, especially the one with the empty-looking chair and the small name card that she barely glanced at. She did not bother reading it. In her mind, anything close to the stage belonged to someone important, and she had already convinced herself that she and Greg were exactly that. Greg tried to keep up with her fast steps while adjusting his shirt every few seconds. "This table looks good," he whispered, pointing to a place farther from the stage. But Amanda shook her head sharply. She wanted the front. She wanted the eyes. She wanted people to see them sitting where only special guests usually sat. She stepped toward the table with the reserved seat while Greg followed with a sigh that said he knew this would happen. The name card with Marcus written on it sat right on the chair, clear and obvious to anyone who cared to look. Amanda did not. She slid the card aside with 2 fingers as if moving a coaster out of her way. She placed it on the table without reading the name and quickly lowered herself onto the seat. Greg sat beside her. A few people nearby noticed what happened, and their expressions changed slightly. Some raised their eyebrows. Others whispered quietly but did nothing. No one wanted to start a confrontation in the middle of a fancy party. Amanda leaned back in the chair with a satisfied look. "Perfect," she said softly as if she had just claimed a prize. Greg looked around awkwardly. "Are you sure we're supposed to sit here?" he asked in a low whisper. Amanda waved him off. "Seats are seats," she said carelessly. "If someone wanted it, they should have been here." From across the hall, Marcus was finishing his drink, still unaware that the seat he had quietly reserved was now taken. He looked around the room to find the right moment to return to the table. He did not rush. He liked taking small pauses before joining crowds. But something in the energy of the room felt different now. People were glancing at him, then glancing at the front table, then back at him. He noticed the strange behavior but could not understand it yet. Amanda, meanwhile, had started chatting with another couple at the table. She spoke loudly, laughing at things that were not that funny. She wanted her presence to be noticed, and she was succeeding. A few guests turned their heads toward the noise. Greg tried to act friendly, but it was clear he was only there to support Amanda's need to feel superior. He looked at the stage and pretended to check his phone, trying to make himself look busy. A woman sitting at a nearby table leaned toward her friend and whispered, "That seat was reserved." "I think it belonged to someone important," her friend nodded but kept her voice low. "They moved the name card, didn't they?" The first woman nodded again. They both looked toward Marcus, then at Amanda, then back at Marcus. It was becoming clear something was slowly unfolding, like a quiet storm building strength. Marcus finally started walking toward his table. His steps were calm, his posture relaxed. He didn't look upset. He simply looked like a man returning to the seat he believed was waiting for him. As he approached, Amanda noticed someone walking toward her. She assumed he was a waiter coming to offer drinks or check something on the table. She did not bother giving him a proper look. Greg noticed him too and straightened up slightly. Someone's coming," he whispered to Amanda. She barely reacted. She was too busy adjusting the napkin on her lap, pretending to fit in with people she believed were lower than her. Marcus reached the table and stopped politely beside Amanda. "Excuse me," he said gently. "I think you're sitting in my seat." His voice was calm, respectful, and without any anger. He simply stated a fact. Amanda turned her head slowly, looked him up and down as if scanning his entire worth in 1 second, then gave a small amused laugh. "Oh," she said in a tone that sounded like she was talking to a child, "I don't think so." This seat was empty. Greg nodded as if backing her up. "Yeah, man," he added awkwardly. "Plenty of seats around. Maybe try another one." A quiet wave passed through nearby tables. People who had been watching the situation leaned in a little. They wanted to see what would happen. They expected conflict, maybe a sharp exchange of words. But Marcus didn't argue. He only pointed gently at the name card Amanda had placed aside on the table. "That's my name," he said softly. Amanda glanced at the card, then rolled her eyes. "You can sit somewhere else," she said, turning her body away from him. "We're already here." Greg watched the moment with rising discomfort, but he did not stop her. The tension in the hall grew thicker. People who normally minded their own business were now following every moment with quiet curiosity. Marcus took a breath, still calm, still composed, and stood there for a moment longer. He wasn't angry, but everyone watching could feel something big was about to happen soon. The moment Marcus stood beside the table, a small circle of silence formed around him. It was like the air in the room changed, even though no one said anything loudly. People pretended to sip their drinks, pretended to look at their phones, pretended to stay busy, but they were all watching. Everyone felt the tension that Amanda created with just a few careless words. And Marcus, standing so calmly, made the situation even more noticeable. He did not raise his voice. He did not get angry. He simply looked at Amanda and Greg with the same gentle expression he had when he walked into the party. But that calmness somehow made their behavior seem even worse. The couple did not expect him to stay there. They expected him to walk away quietly, embarrassed or intimidated. Instead, he stayed still, as if waiting to give them another chance to correct their mistake. Greg shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He could feel eyes on them from all sides. His shoulders tightened, and he leaned slightly toward Amanda. "Maybe we should just," he began to whisper, but Amanda cut him off sharply under her breath. "No," she hissed, still wearing a fake smile, "he can sit somewhere else." "We are not moving." She flicked her hair back and adjusted her dress. Her body language showed irritation, not guilt. She wanted to look strong, even though deep inside she felt the attention burning on her skin. Marcus gave them a small, polite nod. "I understand," he said softly. His calm voice surprised even Greg. Marcus then glanced at the name card again and picked it up gently. He held it in his hand for a moment as if deciding whether to push the matter further. But instead of arguing, he simply stepped back and looked around the hall as if searching for a staff member. 2 waiters stood nearby watching the situation quietly. One of them looked nervous. The other seemed ready to help but unsure what the right thing to do was. People at surrounding tables exchanged looks. Some looked embarrassed. Some looked annoyed at the couple. And some watched with quiet satisfaction, expecting drama to unfold. Amanda smirked when Marcus stepped back. To her, this meant she had won. Greg let out a small breath, relieved that Marcus did not fight for the seat. But his relief was short-lived. The whispers around the hall were growing. Some guests leaned toward each other and murmured things like, "That seat was reserved. Why won't they move?" She moved the name card. Who do they think they are? This was the kind of attention Amanda wanted, but not in this way. She suddenly felt the atmosphere shift. People were not admiring her. They were judging her. And her smile began to tremble slightly at the corners as she realized she might have misread the crowd. Marcus walked to the side and spoke quietly to a nearby staff member, who instantly nodded with respect. The staff knew exactly who he was. Marcus wasn't just a guest, he was one of the main investors of the entire charity event. His money funded the very hall they were standing in, the decorations, the performances, even the dinner being served. The staff member hurried off with worried eyes, knowing this situation could blow up fast if not handled carefully. The guests watched Marcus with a new sense of curiosity. Why wasn't he angry? Why wasn't he shouting? Why was he handling things with so much grace? His calmness was almost confusing for people used to dramatic reactions. He was a man who had power, but he didn't need to show it through loud behavior. Amanda tried to continue her loud conversation with the couple next to her. But her voice kept shaking. Every time she laughed, it sounded forced. Every time she tried to make a joke, it fell flat. People were no longer interested in her. They were watching Marcus instead, waiting to see what he would do next. Greg leaned closer to her again. Amanda, seriously, maybe we should move, he whispered nervously, people are staring. Let them stare, Amanda snapped quietly, but even she felt uncomfortable now. She tried to hold her confidence like a crown, but it was slipping. Marcus stood at a distance, not too far from the table, not too close. He did not want to embarrass them publicly. That was never his intention. But he also was not going to walk away from something that was clearly disrespectful. His posture remained calm, his eyes soft, but the room could feel that something important was building beneath the surface. After a moment, the staff member returned with the event coordinator, a professional-looking woman who immediately understood the seriousness of the situation. She walked toward the table where Amanda and Greg sat. People around nearly held their breath. This was no longer a small misunderstanding. This was turning into something much bigger. Amanda straightened up in her chair as the coordinator approached, trying to look classy. She smiled brightly as if she had done nothing wrong. Greg's face was already pale. Marcus watched quietly from the side, giving the coordinator a respectful nod. The moment had come, and everyone felt it. The real truth, the one that would flip the night upside down, was only seconds away from being revealed. And the couple had no idea just how unprepared they were for what was coming next. The coordinator approached the table with calm steps, but her eyes showed she already knew exactly what had happened. She stopped beside Amanda and Greg, offering them a polite smile, the kind of smile someone gives right before delivering uncomfortable news. Around them, the room grew quieter, as if the crowd held its breath without even meaning to. The soft music in the background suddenly felt far away, like it was playing in another world. "Good evening," the coordinator said gently. "I believe there may be a misunderstanding," her voice was soft, but it carried across nearby tables easily. Amanda smiled back with confidence, clearly believing she was on the safe side. Greg tried to copy her expression, but his uneasy eyes gave away his nerves. "What misunderstanding?" Amanda asked in a friendly tone that felt slightly fake. "This seat was empty when we arrived," she tapped the table lightly as if to prove she was comfortable and in control. The coordinator glanced at the name card lying beside Amanda's hand. She picked it up, dusted it gently, and held it up. "This seat is reserved," she said with a calm, respectful voice. "It belongs to Mr. Marcus." She then turned her head slightly toward the area where Marcus stood quietly, watching the situation with patient eyes. A few gasps escaped from nearby tables. Some people froze mid-sip with their glasses halfway to their mouths. The tension had been building for minutes, and now the truth had finally begun to rise to the surface. Amanda's confident smile flickered. She looked at the name card again and then back at the coordinator, trying to regain her balance. "We didn't know," Amanda replied quickly. "There was no sign," Greg added weakly, even though the name card was right in front of them when they sat down. He stared at the card now as if seeing it for the first time in his life. The coordinator didn't accuse them. She didn't raise her voice. She kept her polite smile, but her words were firm. "This table is reserved for the event's top supporters," she explained softly. "This seat is meant for a very important contributor." She looked toward Marcus again in a way that made nearly everyone else turn as well. Amanda followed the direction of the coordinator's gaze and finally saw Marcus standing calmly across the room. He wasn't glaring, wasn't frowning, wasn't crossing his arms. He had the same gentle expression as always. And somehow, that made everything worse for her. If he had looked angry, Amanda could have defended herself. But he looked kind, almost too kind. Her face grew warm. A strange panic settled in her chest. She realized people were waiting for her reaction. The attention she craved earlier now felt heavy, like a spotlight she desperately wanted to step out of. She forced another smile. "Oh, he's the investor?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly. Greg felt his heart drop. The word investor hit him sharply. He sat up straighter, suddenly sweating. He whispered to Amanda under his breath, "Amanda, we took the investor's seat." His voice trembled with disbelief. He knew what that meant in a room like this. People respected investors. Organizers depended on them. Guests admired them. And they had just treated one like he was nothing. The coordinator nodded gently. "Yes," she confirmed. "Mr. Marcus is one of the main reasons this event is even possible." The words echoed through the room like a soft thunder. People looked at Marcus with a new kind of respect. Someone at a nearby table whispered, "Oh my, that man." Another replied, "He's the one funding everything." And they spoke to him like that? Amanda felt her throat tighten. For the first time that night, she couldn't speak. Her mind replayed every word she said to him, the dismissive tone, the eye roll, the command to sit somewhere else. Her own voice echoed in her head like a reminder of her arrogance. She stared at Marcus, unable to look away. Meanwhile, Marcus stepped forward, but still with calm steps. He approached the table slowly, giving the couple enough time to process what they had done. The guests' eyes followed him like he was walking down a grand stage. But Marcus didn't look dramatic. He looked peaceful, even gentle. That made the moment feel even more powerful. When he reached the table, he spoke softly. "It's all right," he said, and those simple words cut deeper than any anger could have. "I didn't want to cause trouble." His humility shocked the crowd. Some people shook their heads in disbelief. How could someone with so much power be so calm? Amanda finally stood up, her legs shaky. We didn't know," she said quietly. "We're so sorry." Greg stood too, his face white as a sheet. He kept nodding, unable to find words. But Marcus only smiled kindly, as if he truly held no grudge. The room watched in silence, waiting for what would happen next. Everyone knew that this simple seating mistake was about to turn into a life-changing lesson, one the couple would never forget, and one the entire party would talk about long after the night ended. The moment Amanda and Greg stood up, the atmosphere in the hall shifted again. Their apology hung in the air, but nobody spoke. People were waiting for Marcus's response, waiting to see how a man with such quiet strength would handle being disrespected in front of an entire room. Marcus looked at the couple with soft eyes, and the calm on his face made the silence even heavier. He wasn't angry. He wasn't proud. He simply looked human. That alone touched several guests watching from nearby tables. Amanda clutched her purse with shaking fingers. She had always believed confidence could fix anything, but now she felt naked in front of the crowd. Greg, beside her, couldn't stop wiping his forehead. He kept glancing around nervously, wishing the ground would open and swallow him. They had made a simple choice, take a seat, but now it was clear that choice had turned into something much bigger than they expected. The coordinator stepped slightly aside to allow Marcus to approach his seat. But instead of going straight to the table, Marcus took a moment to speak to the couple. He didn't raise his voice above a gentle tone. "It's all right," he repeated softly, "I know you didn't mean harm." Those words hit everyone around them unexpectedly. He gave them dignity they had failed to give him earlier. That alone stunned the crowd even more than the reveal about his status. Amanda lowered her eyes. For the first time that night, she didn't feel like the most important person in the room. Greg swallowed hard and finally whispered, "We should have been respectful." "I'm sorry," his voice cracked. He sounded embarrassed, but also honestly regretful. Marcus nodded once, still calm. "Let's enjoy the evening," he said quietly, "no need to make this bigger than it is." His words were simple, but everyone felt the deeper meaning behind them. He was choosing peace, not because he was weak, but because he understood strength came from how a person carried themselves, not how loud they could be. Amanda and Greg stepped aside, allowing Marcus to finally take the seat that belonged to him. As he sat down, the entire table straightened respectfully. Even people further away adjusted their posture, touched by his grace. The coordinator gave Marcus a grateful smile, relieved he had handled the situation with such kindness. A waiter rushed over to pour him a drink, almost tripping over his own feet in nervousness. But Amanda and Greg weren't done facing the consequences. Even though Marcus had forgiven them, the room hadn't. Eyes followed them as they stood in an awkward corner near the table. No one shouted at them or insulted them, but the silence felt heavier than any words. Sometimes quiet judgment hurts more than loud criticism. Amanda could feel the weight of every stare pressing against her back. Greg felt his confidence draining away with every passing second. A group of guests at a nearby table whispered quietly, "They treated him like nobody, and he's the main investor." Another said, "Money doesn't show on someone's face." They shouldn't have acted like that. The whispers were soft, but they reached Amanda's ears like small stings, each one sharper than the last. Amanda tried to smile again, but it was weak and trembling. She looked around, hoping someone might invite her to sit at another table, but no one did. People turned away politely or pretended not to see her. Greg tugged at her sleeve. "Let's just go to the back," he whispered. "We can sit somewhere else." She nodded, defeated. They slowly walked toward a table near the edge of the hall, far from the stage, far from attention, far from the place they once believed they deserved. Meanwhile, Marcus spoke with a few guests who approached him quietly, congratulating him on the event and thanking him for his contributions. But even then, Marcus remained humble. He listened more than he spoke and stayed soft-spoken and warm. Nothing about him fit the image of an arrogant investor. And that made people admire him even more. As Amanda and Greg sat at their new, distant table, the evening continued around them. The coordinator went on checking other arrangements. The lights dimmed slightly for the first presentation. The music softened into a warm melody. But for Amanda and Greg, the night had already changed. They felt small in a way they weren't used to feeling, and every second made them remember how quickly pride can collapse when the truth walks in quietly wearing a kind smile. And though Marcus didn't look at them again or mention their mistake, the lesson hung in the air, a lesson the entire room had now witnessed, one that would soon become the unforgettable center of the night's conversation. The lights dimmed slowly as the host walked onto the stage, holding a microphone with a bright smile. People clapped politely, the sound echoing through the grand hall. But even with the spotlight on the host, many guests kept glancing toward Marcus and the couple who had taken his seat earlier. The tension had faded, but the curiosity had not. People were still whispering, still thinking, still replaying the moment in their minds. Amanda sat at the back table with her shoulders tight and her jaw clenched. The cheerful music and soft lighting did not reach her heart. Her mind replayed Marcus's calm voice again and again. She felt every bit of her confidence sinking. Greg sat beside her in silence. He no longer tried to pretend he was fine. His eyes were fixed on the stage, but his thoughts were far away. He knew people noticed them, and he hated the feeling of being quietly judged. Up front, Marcus sat at his rightful table, not acting special, not showing off, just listening attentively to the host. He rested his hands on his lap, looking peaceful. Even the people sitting beside him looked more relaxed now, as if his presence calmed the entire table. A waiter placed a drink in front of him, and Marcus gave a grateful nod. He always noticed small things like kindness from staff, even at big events. The host began speaking about the purpose of the charity, the projects completed, the goals for the coming year. People clapped at the right moments. But then the host paused and smiled wider, raising his voice slightly, and tonight, he said, we honor one of the most generous supporters of our organization. Heads turned toward the front table almost instantly. Some already guessed what was coming. Others leaned forward like they were about to witness something important. The host looked directly at Marcus. Please join me in applauding our biggest investor of the year, the man whose contributions helped build everything you see tonight. Mr. Marcus. The room erupted into applause. Loud, warm, genuine. People stood. People cheered. Some even whistled. The spotlight swung across the hall until it landed on Marcus, lighting up his calm face. He looked surprised for a moment, almost shy, but he stood slowly and nodded politely in appreciation. The applause felt endless. Guests who previously ignored him now clapped the hardest. People who barely noticed his entrance now smiled with admiration. Some guests whispered, he looks so humble. Others said, I can't believe he handled that earlier with so much grace. The respect in the room grew like a rising tide. But no one felt the moment more intensely than Amanda and Greg. As soon as the spotlight hit Marcus, both of them froze. Amanda's eyes widened. Her breath caught in her throat. She could barely swallow. Greg felt a cold wave pass down his spine. He whispered under his breath, oh no, they now understood the full weight of their mistake. They hadn't just taken a random man's seat. They had disrespected the most important guest of the night. The applause still filled the hall when the host continued, this year, Marcus supported our scholarship program, our food drives, and our youth centers. Hundreds of children have better lives because of him. The crowd applauded again, louder than before. Marcus simply bowed his head, almost embarrassed by the attention. He wasn't the kind of man who enjoyed the spotlight. But he accepted it politely because the cause mattered to him. As Marcus sat down again, conversations erupted all around the room. People whispered his name. Some discussed his investments, others his generosity. But most talked about his character, the kindness he showed even after being treated unfairly. Respect for him grew with every passing second. Amanda felt her chest tighten. She couldn't look at anyone. Her eyes stayed locked on her hands, which trembled in her lap. She whispered, I can't believe, we spoke to him like that. Greg nodded weakly. We embarrassed ourselves, in front of everyone, he said, his voice shaking. He felt small, like a child who finally understood the consequences of careless actions. But the worst part wasn't the humiliation. It was the realization that Marcus never deserved the disrespect they gave him. Not because he was wealthy. Not because he was important. But because he was a kind human being who they treated like he was nothing. The host began calling people to the stage for awards and acknowledgments. But Amanda and Greg barely noticed. Their world had shrunk into a bubble of regret, embarrassment, and the echo of their own arrogance. And the entire hall, whether they meant to or not, had witnessed the moment when the couple learned a lesson they would never forget. But the night was not over yet. Another twist was coming, one that would spread across the hall like a wildfire and leave the couple completely stunned. The applause slowly faded as the program continued, but the energy in the hall had completely changed. People no longer whispered about the fancy decorations or the expensive outfits. They whispered about Marcus, the quiet man who had become the center of the night without even trying. Every now and then, someone glanced at him with new admiration. Even the staff moved around with extra care, making sure he had everything he needed. But Marcus didn't act any differently. He still smiled politely, still spoke softly, still blended into the room with gentle humility. Meanwhile, in the back of the hall, Amanda and Greg sat stiffly in their chairs, feeling smaller with every passing minute. They couldn't escape the whispers. They couldn't escape the glances. Every time someone's eyes moved in their direction, they wondered if that person knew what they had done. And the truth was, almost everyone did. Word had spread around the hall faster than music. Guests leaned across tables, whispering the same sentence again and again. They took the investor's seat. Amanda's chest felt tight, as if her own pride was now crushing her. She had always cared about how she appeared in public. Tonight, that obsession turned on her. All the confidence she walked in with had melted into regret. She kept replaying the moment she told Marcus to sit somewhere else. That single sentence burned in her memory like a flame that wouldn't go out. Greg stared at the tablecloth, barely blinking. His usually bold personality had disappeared completely. "I can't believe we did this," he whispered. "We made ourselves look like fools," Amanda wanted to agree, but her voice was trapped behind her shame. She could only nod and stare at the floor. Up front, the host invited a group of children on stage, scholarship students who benefited from the charity program. The room filled with soft claps. Marcus watched the children with a warm smile. He always cared more about people than praise. Cameras flashed as the children thanked him publicly, calling him Uncle Marcus, because he visited their school once a month. The crowd laughed warmly at that moment, touched by his kindness. But that laughter felt like knives to Amanda and Greg. Their mistake seemed 1,000 times heavier when they saw the truth about Marcus, a man who wasn't only wealthy, but kind-hearted. A man who didn't use his power for attention. A man who deserved respect long before they learned about his contributions. Just then, a soft alarm sound chimed from the back of the hall, the kind used to alert staff for emergencies. But it wasn't an emergency. It was a notification used by the media team. On a giant screen near the stage, the live comments from viewers watching the charity broadcast began scrolling. And among the comments were clips recorded by guests earlier in the evening. Someone had filmed the moment Amanda moved Marcus's name card. Someone else had filmed her refusing to give up the seat. Another angle showed Marcus standing calmly beside them, speaking politely while being dismissed. None of the videos were hateful, but they were real. They showed the truth clearly, and they spread across the live stream like wildfire. Amanda gasped loudly. Greg's face turned completely pale. He whispered, "Oh no, it's being shown live." He covered his face with his hands. People around the hall turned to look at them again, now fully aware that the videos were out there for the world to see. Amanda stood up slightly, then sat back down. Her legs were shaking too much to move. She whispered, "Greg, people online are going to destroy us." She wasn't wrong. The comments on the screen were flying fast. Why did they treat him like that? That man handled it better than I would have. Respect to Marcus. Pride always falls first. The videos didn't show Amanda screaming or being cruel. They showed something worse, her dismissing a stranger with arrogance. And that soft kind of disrespect was enough to make viewers furious. Across the hall, Marcus saw the videos too. For the first time that night, he looked uneasy. He didn't want the couple to be publicly shamed. That wasn't his intention. He didn't want their mistake becoming entertainment for strangers. So he stood. Quietly. Calmly. Gracefully. And he walked toward the stage while the host was speaking. The host paused, confused for a second, then smiled broadly, assuming Marcus wanted to give a surprise speech. The crowd cheered softly. But Marcus raised a hand gently, signaling he didn't want applause. The room fell silent instantly. His presence commanded respect without him even trying. He took the microphone, looked at the giant screen, then back at the crowd. His voice was soft, but it carried enough power to silence even the noisiest guests. "I want to say something important," he began. Everyone leaned in, eager to hear what he would say next. And Amanda and Greg felt their hearts stop, because whatever he was about to say would decide whether they would be destroyed or forgiven in the eyes of the entire room. The room fell into complete silence as Marcus stood on stage holding the microphone. The soft lights above him made his calm face glow gently, and even the people at the back felt the weight of the moment. No one whispered. No one moved. Even the waiters froze where they stood. Everyone knew something important was coming, something that might change how they saw the entire night. Marcus looked at the giant screen again, where the clips of Amanda and Greg's mistake kept replaying. He didn't look angry. He didn't look proud. He looked thoughtful. Almost saddened. He took a quiet breath, and then he spoke in a soft, steady voice that carried through the hall more powerfully than shouting ever could. "I've seen the videos," he said gently, "and I know many of you have seen them too." The audience remained silent, listening closely. His voice was warm, but serious. "Before anything else, I want to make one thing clear." He paused, letting the suspense grow naturally. "No one here deserves to be judged for one moment of weakness." A few guests blinked, surprised. This was not the speech they expected. Marcus continued, "Tonight is about kindness, charity, and helping each other. And if we forget that, even for a second, then all of this loses its meaning." He gestured toward the decorations, the stage, the children, the tables. "We cannot claim to support people in need while being cruel to each other." His words hit deep. Many guests lowered their eyes in reflection. At their table, Amanda and Greg sat frozen. They didn't dare move. Greg's fingers dug into the sides of the chair, and Amanda's breath trembled in her throat. They waited for their humiliation to be sealed publicly, for Marcus to expose their arrogance and let the crowd judge them. But what he said next shocked the entire room. "I don't want those videos used to shame anyone," Marcus said, looking straight at the camera now, speaking not just to the room, but to the livestream viewers too. "Please, stop sharing them," the audience gasped softly. The screen froze instantly as the media team hurried to follow his request. Marcus stepped closer to the edge of the stage, his voice gentle but firm. "We have all made mistakes," he said. "Every one of us has said something without thinking. Every one of us has misjudged a stranger. That doesn't make someone a bad person. It makes them human." The hall felt warmer suddenly, filled with emotion rather than judgment. Amanda felt tears building behind her eyes. She had been ready for punishment, not mercy. Greg swallowed hard, his heartbeat in his ears. Marcus was doing something neither of them expected. He was protecting them instead of exposing them. Marcus continued, "Tonight, someone made a wrong assumption about me." His voice softened even more. "But earlier today, I made wrong assumptions about someone else too." A few guests raised their eyebrows in surprise. Marcus smiled slightly. "We are all learning. We are all growing. And the only way we move forward is with grace." He placed the microphone down for a moment, letting those words settle. Then he looked directly at Amanda and Greg. Everyone followed his gaze. Amanda's breath caught. Greg held perfectly still, as if even blinking would break him. Marcus spoke directly to them, still in front of everyone, but with a kindness that felt personal. "Thank you for listening earlier," he said softly, "and thank you for understanding now." Amanda covered her mouth, tears slipping down her cheeks. Greg blinked rapidly as emotion filled his eyes. They nodded slowly, unable to find words yet deeply grateful. Marcus then turned back to the crowd. "This event is about creating a better world. So let's begin that work, right here, right now." He smiled gently. "Let's treat each other with respect, even when we don't know who someone is. Let's show kindness first, and judgment never." The hall erupted into applause, not polite, not forced, but full of admiration. People stood again, applauding him not because he was wealthy, but because he was wise, humble, and deeply human. Amanda cried quietly into her hands. Greg placed a hand on her back, humbled beyond words. They weren't forgiven because they deserved it. They were forgiven because Marcus chose to teach compassion through action, not lectures. And that was a lesson neither of them would ever forget. The host returned to the stage, smiling proudly. "Thank you, Marcus," he said warmly. "Tonight, you didn't just donate money. You gave us something far more valuable, perspective." The applause rose again like a wave, filling the room with warmth and unity. As Marcus walked back to his table, people reached out to shake his hand. Some thanked him. Some simply smiled with respect. He accepted every gesture with the same gentle humility he carried all night. Amanda and Greg stood slowly from their seats as Marcus passed by. Amanda wiped her tears and whispered, "Thank you, for your kindness." Greg nodded beside her. "We won't forget this." Marcus simply smiled at them, not with superiority, but with understanding. The night moved on, but something had changed in the room. People were warmer. Kinder. More aware of the power of small actions. And by the time the event ended, everyone left with the same quiet thought in their minds: true power is not shown by status, money, or seats, but by how a person treats others, even when no one is watching. And that unforgettable lesson lived far beyond the walls of the party, changing hearts long after the last applause faded.